Hi, everybody, and welcome. My name is Mary Fran Bontempo. I am here with my friend Diana Dubbs, and we are here presenting conversations on addiction presented by DreamLife Recovery. We are both here, Diane and I have had different experiences in the world of addiction, and we are here mainly for the purpose of not only sharing our personal experiences, but offering those experiences as help and information and guidance, particularly for families who are struggling with someone in addiction or for anyone else who is experiencing problems with addiction and wants to maybe figure out how to get their families involved and with family support. So I'm going to turn it over to my friend Diana to say hello. Diana, welcome.
Hi, Mary Fran, and thank you so much for proposing this idea, and of course to Dream Life too, always supporting us. I'm going to apologize up front if you see a child running in the background or a dog barking. You know, we are in quarantine, hopefully lifting if New Jersey doesn't mess it up. There's been
Yeah.
a lot of warnings from Governor Murphy that he is watching us. So we'll just see what happens here.
Yeah. Well, and these are challenging times, but it's clearly nothing like the challenges that we have when we're dealing with addiction. So we'll deal with this. We'll put up with it. So one of the reasons that I invited you to do this was because in you and I getting to know each other, we were talking about our different experiences. And my son, David, whom you know, obviously, is in recovery from heroin addiction, and he is 8.5 years healthy and sober. But when we had experienced this initially, there was very little information for families. We kind of just dropped him off, and I was like, well, okay, now what? I mean, I had no idea what to expect. There was no information. You had a different experience, and your approach with your family was the thing that just really interested me. I loved the way that you handled involving your family in this. So I would like today's conversation to be about you telling your experience and how you and your family manage that. So I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
So I got sober. I'm coming up on, 6.25 years, 6.5 years, something like that. And, my family was instrumental in getting me to treatment. It was, if I didn't believe them when they put the boundary in place, I don't think it would have been as effective for me. On the flip side, I was also ready mentally, physically, emotionally. I was 31 years old. I was done. I was waiting for somebody to say to me, it's time, and they just happened to be the ones who did it. But when they dropped me off, I'm first generation Italian. Addiction is not something that we spoke about. I don't even think it was something that anybody really understood, including myself, because when they dropped me off at treatment, I just thought that they were going to get rid of the drugs and alcohol in my system. I didn't know what that really meant. Like, I didn't know what I was going to be doing there,
Right.
And very quickly after a couple of days, I heard a gentleman, talk about what was going on, I call it like between his ears, that like white noise and this craziness that was happening. And I identified with him, and I realized that, I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't alone, that there were other people that felt exactly like I did. I just couldn't explain what was going on with me for a really long time,
And I'll just jump in and interject here and say that that's something that as a parent with no experience in that world, we don't get. We don't understand what goes on in the minds of someone who's addicted. And that's probably the biggest problem, because you can't help somebody like that when you don't know.
No, and I think I've shared this with you before, is that what they couldn't understand was they would say to me like, oh, you're so beautiful and you're so smart, and don't you see that? And my answer was always no. Like, what I couldn't see what they were telling me, and I knew they believed it. I just didn't believe it. The treatment center that I went to, so 6.5 years ago, it was not like it was today. And I don't think 6.5 years is so long ago, but there just wasn't that many options like we have today to go to treatment. So, the process went like this. They called their doctor, their general practitioner, who was this, amazing holistic doctor. And he said, this is the best place to send her. You're going to send her here. Otherwise, you're going to have to put her on a plane and send her, someplace else. And they said, okay, we're going to send her here. So they dropped me off at this place. And in their head, because they didn't understand how it was going to work, and they were also, pretty angry and just done.
Right.
I
Fed
think
up.
they thought, we're going to drop her off and she's going to get fixed, and then that's it. Well,
Oh, if
the
that were
police.
only the way it worked, right? If that, I mean, and really, I think that that's a very common belief, especially the first time. And I say the first time because many, many, many people who go to treatment do not get it right the first time. But I think from the family's perspective, you're so relieved to have somebody go somewhere where somebody can help them, and you just want them to come home and be fine. But that's not how it
Well,
works.
and today, looking back on it, because I call myself a unicorn because I went to treatment one time. But looking back on it, I can understand, from my parents' perspective, my mom needed that separation. My dad needed the separation. My brother was angry at me. Like, they all needed me to be gone, and they didn't,
Yes.
and I didn't understand it. And, at the time, my brother was the one that was facilitating me going, and I was mad at him. Like, there was just a lot of emotion. So, like, we needed to be separated.
Right.
So the treatment center that I went to, they had this really amazing program. It was a family education program, and it was almost like a very quick, like, treatment getaway for the families. But again, my family didn't really understand. My parents were, they're first generation here from Italy. Well, I'm first generation, so they moved here in 1965. So they were like, we're not going for a couple days. And I had talked to my counselor, and I said, I really think I need my parents to come and understand what I've learned. And she said, well, I think you need to have that conversation. So I had called my mom one night, and I said to her, listen, I get it. I understand why I'm here, and I understand I have to stay here. But if you want me to get better, you're going to need to get better too. Like, you guys dropped me off, and then you expect me to come home, and I need you to figure it out too.
Right.
And really what it was, I was sitting in this lecture hall one day, and, there was a pastor that was there, and he had shared this story about, it was a hypothetical story, a metaphor about how he had this plant, and he bought this beautiful plant, and he had brought it home, and he planted it in his backyard, and he fed it, and he watered it, and he gave it so much love, and he couldn't figure out why the plant was dying. And he was driving down the road one day, and he saw this billboard, and the billboard said, for $42,000, you can drop your plant off, and all you need to do is visit it one time, and we'll get it better, right? So that's what he did. He dropped the plant off. He paid the money. He visited it one time. The plant was thriving. When the 32 days was over, he went back. He picked up the plant. He brought it home. He put it right back in the same spot, and he just did the exact same things. And he couldn't figure out why the plant was dying again when it had been so healthy in the place that he had just visited that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
I
made
love
so
that.
much sense.
I love that analogy. That is just perfect. And as the parent who was done, who was fed up, who was just over it, I can totally sympathize with your parents and with every parent who sends their kid and finally sleeps that night. The first night you send your child to treatment, you finally sleep, and that's such a blessing. However, if we want, and this is the message that we kind of want to drive home today, that if you seriously and truly, nobody picks this. Nobody decides they want to wake up one day and be an addict. Nobody picks it. So you have to stop blaming the person who's addicted. Nobody wants to be in that state of mind. But if you're genuinely committed as a parent or as a family member to help, to want to see your loved one healthy, you got to get involved. That's the message.
Well,
you have to get involved.
And I remember, so my sister-in-law actually came, and she did the family education program. She was like the appointed person who came, and, she spent the 3 days, she got the education, and, she said to me at the end of it, she said, I'm glad that I came because everything that we were going to do was wrong. And then at the end of my treatment stay, we did this, this group meeting with, my brother and my sister-in-law and me, because they were the ones who facilitated my treatment, and they were the ones, and I understand it now, because they were the ones who were going to keep my parents on track with me not manipulating, you know? And my brother looking at me, and I laugh about it now, but and for lack of better words, he looked at me and he said, I am just glad to know you have a disease and you're not just an asshole, and
It's
he,
true. Very true.
and he was right, and it was through that process that they understood. Now, here's the thing. We all gained a little acceptance through this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they may not truly understand what I go through on a daily basis. They may not truly understand why I have to go to so many meetings for recovery. They may not understand why it takes me so long to do things, or why I have to pace myself in a different way, because even after 6.5 years, I have to do things differently than somebody else.
Right.
And I don't understand why they do things the way that they do things. But we all live in a world where we just accept that it just is what it is,
Right. Correct. Yeah. So I think again, the message here is, and I think in these conversations, we kind of want to leave everybody with one main thing every time we come out of conversation. And I think that that's exactly it. Well, perhaps it's two things with this. Perhaps it's, we have to accept what we don't understand. That's the first thing. And we have to be willing to be involved in the process so that we can all be healthy. Because there's, it's the addict is one thing, but we also have behaviors that are enabling and things that we do just in the best of circumstances that aren't always healthy relationship wise.
Willingness is such a tricky thing. I talk about willingness a lot in recovery because willingness is challenging. Willingness is doing something even if you don't want to, and it is, and that is how we strive for recovery. That is how, a lot of families say, how come you can get it and my kid can't? How come, what clicked for you and why isn't it clicking for my kid? It's the level of willingness,
Yeah.
when I came into recovery, I was willing to do things, even if I didn't want to. I knew I didn't have another option,
Mm-hmm.
and every decision that I had made up until that point got me sitting in treatment,
Right. Right.
So clearly the decisions I was making weren't right. And I had enough of a willingness to just say, okay, let me just try it. I'll just try it.
And that, and truly that has to be, again, as a parent, we have to recognize that too. I don't understand this. I don't live in this world. I mean, I live in it, but I don't live inside the head of an addict. I don't know what's going on. You have to be willing to put yourself in the hands of people who can give you some guidance. So, first of all, thank you for your time and for being willing to share your story. And I hope we have many more of these conversations. But again, what we want to leave people out there with is there is hope, there is help. You have to be willing to go for it. And please, reach out. Diana, can you tell people where they can find DreamLife Recovery? And there is, there are family programs. There are all sorts of things that are available there. And first and foremost, there's somebody to talk to. So can you tell everybody where they can find DreamLife?
So you can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on LinkedIn. Our website is www.dreamliferecovery.com. Please check us out. We are located in Donegal, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour east of Pittsburgh. We are a beautiful facility, but the best part is that any one of us is willing to talk to you about recovery, and any one of us is willing to talk you through any of your needs. So.
Yeah, and I would suggest, even if you are not the person suffering from the addiction, if you are a family member, if you are anybody who just needs to understand this a little bit more and maybe learn what you can do, maybe that first step that you can take to maybe help a loved one in addiction, please pick up the phone and call. Reach out to these folks because they have the experience, they have the knowledge, they have the genuine authenticity and desire to help. So Diana, thank you so much for being willing to be part of this first premiere episode of Conversations on Addiction presented by DreamLife Recovery. And we hope that we can have many more of these. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and check us out next time. Take care. Bye.